The film begins in Philadelphia in 1961 when a baby named Elijah Price is born with broken arms and legs. He is born with a rare condition called osteogenesis imperfecta, which makes his bones very fragile and prone to fractures. As Elijah grows older, children at school bully him for being fragile and call him Mr. Glass. As a teenager, Elijah injures his arm and stops going out, so his mother tries to convince him by gifting him comic books. When Elijah gets older, he successfully runs a comic book art gallery with original drawings of superheroes. David Dunn is a security guard at a stadium, facing marital problems, so he applies for a job in New York. As David returns to Philadelphia from New York, his train faces a major accident. Every passenger on board dies except David, who survives without a scratch. The doctors and media are surprised at his survival, and he makes it to headlines in major newspapers. The next morning, he attends a memorial service for train crash victims and discovers a note on his windshield. The note is from a comic store called Limited Edition, asking how many days of his life David has been sick. David continues his normal routine and goes to work. He questions his wife and boss about being sick in the past. They both confirm that David has never taken a day off or suffered from any illness. With the new realization, David feels restless and sleeps in his son's room as he and his wife sleep in different rooms. David feels weird that he has never suffered from any illness, fever, or infection. He then decides to visit the address on the card to get some answers. The next day, David and his son Joseph visit Elijah at his store to discuss the note he left on David's car. Elijah states that he has been studying comics his whole life and believes that comics are a way of expressing and passing ancient history to us through pictorial form. He further questions David about ever being injured and realizes that David had been in an accident in college, which ended his football career. Elijah explains to David that he has been watching the news about the plane crash incident and the hotel fire, which killed all the victims. But what caught his attention is the train incident in which David survived without any harm or injury. According to Elijah, he has been suffering from a genetic disorder that makes him very fragile, so he believes someone in the world must be the opposite of him. Elijah considers David a superhero who can't get hurt or sick and is here to protect others. However, David blows off Elijah's assumptions and calls him a fraud who wasted his time. David feels disappointed after meeting Elijah, as he felt hopeful to get answers and expected his sadness to disappear. So he returns home and opens his old file with a collection of news clips about his car accident years ago. His wife Audrey knocks at his door and she wants to give their marriage another chance after his accident, but David stays quiet and she leaves. The next day, at the university stadium, David is working on his security job when Elijah visits him. Elijah wonders why David chose the security guard job out of other jobs and assumes that it could be because David is a sports fan or he joined it to protect people. David doesn't believe Elijah and arranges a seat for him to watch the match, but Elijah follows David to his security checkpoint. Surprisingly, David bumps into a tall guy with a camouflage jacket and suspects him of carrying a weapon. However, that man dodges the security check and leaves Elijah follows him to confirm his theory about David. As Elijah is weak, he can't follow that man easily and falls downstairs. Before Elijah falls unconscious, he notices a weapon in the man's pocket and realizes that David has super sensory abilities. Elijah ends up in hospital with multiple bone fractures and injuries, and doctors put him for physiotherapy. Audrey is assigned to provide physiotherapy to Elijah. He recognizes her and asks her multiple questions about her personal life. She informs him about meeting David in college and how they got into a car accident, which helped them get together. Meanwhile, David's son, Joseph, believes Elijah's theories about his father being a superhero. Joseph tricks his father into lifting heavier weights than his capacity. At first, David freaks out and asks his son to remove some weight, but he soon lifts 350 pounds. So David realizes he has never utilized his true potential. The next day, he goes to his job but gets a call from his son, Joseph's school, about him being hurt. His son believes his dad is a superhero and tries to fight off bullies, thinking he has super strength like his father. David assures his son that he isn't a superhero but an ordinary man. He elaborates that the head teacher told him that once he almost drowned in the school pool and ended up in hospital with pneumonia. David states that he is just an ordinary man with no superpowers, but his son is fixated on him being a hero. That night, Joseph points a gun at David to prove he can't get hurt. This scene scares him and his wife, Audrey. After a hard struggle, they finally convince Joseph to put down the weapon, or David will leave for New York. After the incident, David goes to meet Elijah, who states the guy with a jacket at the stadium had a gun, just like David suspected. Elijah keeps his hopes high that David is the superhero. However, David mentions that he once got sick during childhood and was hospitalized for pneumonia, so he isn't invincible. He warns Elijah to stay away from him and his family and leaves. A few days pass, and David decides to give his marriage a second chance, so he and his wife go on a date. They both talk about their differences and decide to love and support each other in the future. As they return home, David receives a call about getting a job in New York. While he checks their voicemail, Elijah concludes that water is David's weakness, like his kryptonite. And both Elijah and David are the same and connected by different ends of the same curve. That night, David visits train wrecks and remembers that he hadn't been hurt during his car accident several years ago. He calls Elijah, who advises David to go to a place crowded with people. David soon reaches a station where multiple people bump into him, and he realizes their wrongdoing. He bumps into a thief, a rapist, and a maintenance man who has killed a man on his property. David, stealthy, follows him and enters the house, where he finds the dead owner. In the second room, the killer holds two young girls captive, so David frees them. David then goes to another room to discover the injured mother with her hands tied and tries to rescue her. Suddenly, the criminal comes from behind and pushes David into the pool. David freaks out and starts to drown under the pool cover cloth, but the kids help him get out safely. David then strangles the criminal and discovers that the mother is dead. That night, David returns home and reconciles with his wife. The next morning, Joseph feels surprised to see his parents talking cheerfully. David pushes the newspaper to his son with news that states the rescue mission by a hooded hero. Joseph realizes his father has finally accepted his hero role and promises to keep this a secret. David then visits Elijah's exhibition and meets him at his office. Elijah asks David to shake hands, and suddenly, David sees Elijah causing a plane crash, hotel fire, and train wreck. Elijah has been responsible for these incidents, which makes David feel disgusted that Elijah killed all innocent humans to find a superhero. Elijah states that he wanted to be an anti-hero, so he planned these incidents to find a worthy adversary. Elijah gets happy and calls himself Mr. Glass, but David calls the police, who arrest Elijah for his crimes, and he is put into an institution for being criminally insane. Unbreakable, released in 2000. Directed by M. Night Shyamalan, produced on a budget of approximately $75 million. Unbreakable was originally conceived as the origin story for a larger narrative. The film's story and characters were expanded upon in later movies. The film was heavily influenced by comic book narratives and aesthetics. Unbreakable is a film that merges the world of comic books with reality, offering a fresh perspective on the superhero genre. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications and leave a like to help the channel out.